Dear colleagues, we continue our working day. The topic of our current press briefing is as follows. MP Yegor Sobolev presents public report on his activities. We have Yegor Sobolev, MP, Samopomich faction, and Igor Kogut, director of the USAID RADA program. Good afternoon, dear friends. Happy to see many representatives of mass media here in this room. We are grateful to the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center for the possibility to show this on air and live, and we would ask you to post this briefing as soon as possible. The USAID program RADA is supporting Parliament in developing its civil education and its communication in development of public representation, and we have one of the components which is supporting the committee's development has one element. We are monitoring how the majority constituencies, MPs, communicate with their voters. And today in the morning, I requested data from that monitoring and found out that even MPs from the majority constituencies do not quite often undertake such public reports about carried out work as Yegor Sobolev. That's why I would like to mention that this is a very interesting, rather new event in terms of openness and transparency. Igor Sobolev is chairperson of the Anti-Corruption Committee. He is a member of the Samopomich faction, and he participates also in our project, the model constituency, where we pilot a new style of communications between voters and MPs. And today, actually, we demonstrate this project working. Yegor has been working in Kyiv, and he demonstrates new format of communications with voters. And actually, we believe that this format is able to ensure not just like reports of an MP to the voters, but also the feedback from the voters. And actually this feedback from the voters is very important. The Parliament has to carry out three functions. The legislative, we know much about it, the supervisory function, and the third one, the representative function, because an MP represents the voters, so they have to implement the assignments or agenda suggested by the voters. So I think that this representative function is very important. I would like to welcome you at this interesting and new event, and I wish Yegor Sobolev success in course of this meeting. Thank you for coming. I'm a bit surprised that so many people are interested to know what I have done in the parliament during the period of my work. On Thursday, last Thursday, we were able to see why reports are so important, why it is important for people to know what MPs are doing. In our Ukrainian society, we have a good version of escaping the reality. Some people keep saying all MPs have a habit to stole something. Also, they produce some promises to me, and they keep saying this every day. But people should control how the MPs vote in the plenary room. And on Thursday, they MPs in the parliament voted for dismissal of judges who undertook illegal actions against those judges. At the beginning of that voting, there were not so many MPs registered for the voting, and only after a direct statement of the speaker that he would somehow punish those who did not vote, people registered for voting. On the other hand, it is very important for MPs to communicate information about their achievements, actual achievements in the parliament. I believe that each MP has to present report about activities carried out during a year. And of course, a nice picture is not enough. There should be serious discussion either in the constituency, if this is the majority constituency MP, or there should be a discussion at the party faction, etc. I'm happy to say that this leaflet was edited many times, revised many times, because I tried to pack everything that I wanted in it. In the upper left corner, you can see the work about which was carried out with my participation, and about which I am the most proud of. This is my work as the chairman of Anti-Corruption Committee, which means that we facilitate submission of all the anti-corruption laws. We create public opinion around them. We support the passage of these laws in the parliament. Probably as journalists, you know, you already have an experience of dealing with all those registers about properties, about land properties or assets or expensive properties which belong to different officials, MPs, authorities, etc. And thus you can trace back all that wealth which belongs to some people. I may recollect when after the revolution of dignity, the scandal started to outburst about properties which belonged to government officials with modest salaries who could not explain how they got them. For example, a huge estate of the commander of Kiev militia, and when people compared the official salaries or wages of those people with the real possessions, the suspicions arised about the origin of that wealth. When I was just a candidate to become an MP, I in March 2014, I took pictures of all my possessions, my properties, real estate, a car, etc., and posted all those pictures in the internet and suggested to take the law which would prescribe that the same should be done by all the officials. The next law which we managed to pass was the law about persecution of government officials for the illegal proceeds, and the burden of proof in this law is on the government official. The government official which possesses some possessions has to prove how he or she was able to get that belongings. And you can now observe how this is applied when some officials have to explain how their wives or girlfriends managed to obtain some luxury properties. Also, I participated in the passage of the law on Anti-Corruption Bureau, how the Anti-Corruption Bureau should be Anti-Corruption Bureau members should be appointed, how they should be selected, and a very important step was to pass a provision about high salaries of the anti-corruption investigators and prosecutors. And thus the detectives earn up to 20,000 hryvnia, and the chief of the bureau up to 100,000 hryvnia, and thus their major concern is to bring to responsibility the corrupt officials. The next was the law about decommunization. It was initiated by the Institute of National Memory, but I was among those who supported the passage of this law very much, because I believe that the public memory should be brushed up, and we should get rid of the socialist name of the streets, etc. And vice versa, the national identity could be revived via renaming of the surrounding reality. The next aspect which I would like to emphasize. Quite often people stop me in the streets and stop me and say, you are chairman of the anti-corruption committee. You should do the following. But first I try to explain that we cannot remove the corrupt government officials and to explain that actually we should prevent corruption via proper legislation. And in course of doing this, we read all the draft laws and analyze them for corruption effects.
Out of 297 draft laws which were registered by this parliament, we found corruption-genic norms, and not a single one became the law. There were different ways how to stop it. You remember I was even fighting because of one law in the parliament. I had to discuss it quite energetically in the parliament with the colleagues. In our party there are people, and in the parliament there are people who are ready to oppose such things, but out of 297 corruption laws, not a single one was passed. The opinion of our committee whether the draft law has some possibilities for corruption is of importance. If the MP presents his or her draft law, he very often says that the Committee on Combating Corruption says that it does not have any corruption opportunities. Igor mentioned that because besides the legislative function, I also have a controlling function every week of the work in the committee. Our committee is the only one in the parliament which is getting together and discussing how this or that anti-corruption legislation is or is not implemented. Our latest meeting and discussion was about the problem of judges who told about the pressure from the presidents of the court. There was a pressure for them to pass some illegal ruling, and why that did not lead to any anti-corruption sanctions. The head of one, or the president of one court, resigned. Now I am following it up in the parliament so that he is not dismissed at his own desire, but so that he is dismissed for violating the oath, and this way he will not be getting any benefits. And with another judge, the situation is more complicated, but we have launched the counter offense there as well. And the committee on the mechanism of the hearings in the committees is very useful here. We do a lot to draw attention to the fact of sabotage of laws. Sometimes we organize meetings. Last Friday, we occupied the children's resort. We occupied it because it was stolen by some of the relatives of MPs. I described some senior civil servants whose dismissal I initiated. The first one was the General Prosecutor Vitaly Yarema. I believe that was very important when the General Prosecutor left because of the pressure of the Parliament, not because the President said that I need more loyal person, but because the Parliament said that you do not work properly. That was a good lesson for the society and general prosecutors. There was a big fighting with Constitutional Court, which continues because the Constitutional Court wants to cancel the law on lustration. It's not them who want it, but people who fall under that law. And those who have an influence on the judges of the Constitutional Court. Myself, together with Leonid Yemets, we presented the position of the Parliament in these hearings. I was telling to the judges of the Constitutional Court that this is the only legitimate civilized mechanism of cleaning, because otherwise thousands of senior civil servants of Yanukovych times would continue to hold their positions. And one more thing I would like to mention is the work with the voters. We calculated together with my assistants that I had 43 meetings, but I believe I had more. There were many of them. Not all of them are official. The work with the people is very difficult, and it's not always grateful. Usually people who come to meet you are people who don't believe in anything. They were in the Supreme Court and the General Prosecutor's Office. I've met recently the voters in Solominsky district. There's a person who was kidnapped. He's an entrepreneur. He managed to convince the kidnappers that he will give them money and he will be set free. And the sixth general prosecutor cannot prosecute his kidnapping because the people from the law enforcement bodies participated in this kidnapping. And there are many people like that. They come to you with their pain. And very often you understand that millions of the requests of people to MPs will not be enough to resolve that situation. So when I see a person, it's a pleasure when I see a person who says, you wrote this MP's appeal or claim from the MPs, and the person says, and that helps me win the case in the court. The number of people who come to me is a big number, and I have very big challenge how to manage to read everything, how to prepare the response, and how to control what was the result.
I think that I'm lagging behind in this area, and I will strengthen it. I never missed sessions of the parliament. 94% of time I spent in parliament. That 60% stand for my absence in the parliament when I visited the Venice Commission, where we discussed the lustration law. and where we had to prove that lustration was legal. And the second time I missed the parliamentary sessions when I was in the hospital and I underwent surgery. There were 4 days when I missed the parliamentary sessions. All the rest of parliamentary sessions I attended, and thank you for your attention.
Sergei Moroz from Khmelnytsky. I see from your activity that you are a very active person. So my first question is ratification of the statute, and what are your further actions of the Roman statute, probably. Economic crimes, the punishment for economic crimes. Not economic, environmental crimes. There are accidents happening and no one's responsible for that. And also the immunity of MPs and our tariffs is the main question. I believe it would be correct to answer briefly, because these are very, very big topics. If we are talking about Ukraine joining Roman statute, or in other words, recognition of the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court, you know that the Parliament has approved the decision that we recognize this jurisdiction for investigating the crimes during war. But on the other hand, the Parliament approved a different resolution. The amendments were introduced into the Constitution after the proposal of the President, and and because of that, we will have to refuse from Roman statute in the next 3 years. So I believe that we need to try the police, the state investigatory bureau, the security service of Ukraine. They should ensure efficient Ukrainian investigation. Very often when we go to international justice, they say your security service or your prosecutor's office have not proved anything. Why do you come to us? The second question is on environmental crimes. I believe there are two problems. One is creating or drafting the legislation which would make very big fines, and another problem is the problem of implementing the legislation. Last winter I spent a lot of time in the Kryvyi Rih where the elections were falsified, and we saw that big companies which are located there, they practically are in collusion with the local administration, with most of the local MPs. And there's a big reserve. You can draft the law, but who will be trying to get it implemented? People, at least locally, need to select the representatives who will be taking care of the environment. I've heard the colleague from Kaniv where all the water is poisoned, and most local representatives are closing eyes for that because the big company that is poisoning the water finds more arguments for them. As to tariffs, plus and minus. Plus is that we refused from a big fraud, which was called low price for gas plus subsidies from Naftogaz. The price for people was low, but even back in 2014, just like in 2013, the government was taking big money, really big money, more than $10 billion a year, and would give them to Naftogaz to compensate the difference between the real gas price and what has been set officially. It's good that we have refused from that. We now have another fraud which is called subsidies. And our proposal as Samopomich is the following. First, the prices are to be transparent, because we have never received a realistic calculation why the price is like that. Neither Naftogaz nor the Ministry of Energy can prove why the figure should be, the price should be like that. There should be a real price there, and the system of subsidies, which is very often the not cash but mutual settlements, it leads to many different abuse. And what to do in this case, besides the transparency of prices for gas, our colleagues they promote two important laws, and that's the law that every service should have a clear supply of service. Very seldom an apartment would have an agreement on supply of water or heat or sewage. In the best case, there are agreements for electricity, and that's good when we know who supplies electricity, and this company is responsible for that. And then we are interested in paying less, and many people would save electricity. My family, for example. And that's the second part of the legislation of the draft law. It is important to have individual meters. When we have individual meters for many things, including heat, where in multi-storied buildings we cannot avoid the meters for the whole building, then there will be no fraud related to losses, because now there are companies who say that we lose 70% during transportation to your house. Who can measure 60, 70 or 80%? That is a brief answer to what should be done. We have 5 minutes left only.
Olena Liboshko, Kremenchuk Public TV. You mentioned that you submitted 9,099 appeals from people. Could you provide some statistics from what regions people appeal to you, and about the dismissal of judges, which was voted in on Thursday, and there is a provision which allows them to be restored in their positions. The judges were dismissed on the last day of parliamentary session, and actually now the parliament cannot dismiss the judges for the for the breach of oath, and the judges, of course, and there was a specific procedure which was violated in this case, and in future this violated procedure will become a pretext for judges to go to the court. This again emphasizes that it is important that people follow up their MPs, the MPs for whom they voted, and monitor how MPs vote in Verkhovna Rada. I believe that if public would monitor the MPs, that voting about dismissal of judges were to happen much earlier. Then about to your question about appeals of people, I never try to understand the region from people write appeals to me because I am a representative of a political party. And the very last question. Gaponov Alexander, you mentioned that you initiated passage of the law about illegal proceeds. Yes, you're right, but this is in criminal code, and about burden of proof. This is in many democratic countries. Government officials or politicians have rather limited right to privacy, and the presumption of innocence is applied slightly differently. The politicians and government officials have to prove that they did not violate the law, but not the society has to prove that they violated the law. That's logical if you allow government officials to be responsible for spending some public money. You should be able to supervise how they use this money. And when now my fellow MPs ask me what the law you have passed, what the law you have submitted, we have to inform about cash money which we have in our pockets, and I say that that's in line with legislation. You have to prove that your wealth is earned properly. Thank you.